All right. Well, Craig, thank you so much for being here and joining us today on the show.
Oh, Shiva, I'm really looking forward to it. It's been on my mind for a couple of weeks, so I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Was there anything in particular? You said you were anticipating this. Was there a topic that
I
you?
just I like researching if I'm going to do a podcast, and I've listened to some of your shows, and I just like the conversation you have, and so
Yeah.
it's fun when you know that it's going to be a interesting conversation. Don't know where it's going to go.
Right.
One question can send it off into a hundred different paths, and so I'm just looking forward to having fun conversation.
Yeah. The amount of times I've recorded, 30, 40, 60 minutes, and then we go, oh, we could have talked about this
Yeah,
too. There's so many different side points you can go.
yeah,
But in particular, you are currently big in this whole hypnosis
yeah.
space and understanding, the mind, body, and spirit. And I would love to touch on hypnosis, but if we could backtrack a little bit to get more understanding on, why do you think this area is important and how did you kind of get into this space when you started learning about mind, body, and spirit?
What I like about therapeutic hypnosis, and maybe we can talk a little bit later about maybe the differences between that entertainment side that people see in comedy clubs or Las Vegas shows, YouTube videos, things like that, and the more therapeutic side. But the reason I like this modality for healing is that you do it yourself. A lot of the times when we're in pain, we go to somebody else for them to fix us. And yes, if I'm in a car accident, take me to the doctor. If I have appendicitis, take me to the doctor. Take me to the emergency room. But in terms of the hurt and pain that we hold on to, the trauma maybe we experienced in life, whether it was last week, last month, or when we're a child, that is something that we can heal ourselves. And there's power in that. I don't think a lot of people realize that that's a possibility, especially a lot of us, if we're trying to heal, we're trying to fix ourselves, we may spend a lot of time in talk therapy, in psychotherapy, analytical counseling. And while that can be very helpful and it can be healing, I think oftentimes in that modality, you just end up talking about the pain you see in front of you, not the kind of foundational issues that may be propping up that hurt and pain you're experiencing right now. And so it's always great to talk about, issues of how to relate with somebody, a coworker that maybe you don't get along with, or the relationship you're in. Marriage counseling, I think, is fantastic. I think everybody should go to that at least, once every couple of years. We were talking before we started recording. I met my, well, now wife, but I started dating Christina when we were 19. We're now
Hmm.
57. That's huge. We got married and started dating 1987, married in 1992. Now being 2024, that's huge growth. We're not the same people. I mean, 19 to 29 is huge growth. And so, we do checkups and we do, resets, and the challenges of life can oftentimes be kind of heavy. And so I think in terms of long-term relationships, like a marriage, uh, or especially, with children, getting a second pair of eyes on that is always great. Everybody needs a coach if you want to reach any sort of success, whether, we just finished the Summer Olympics as we're recording this. Every single athlete in the Olympics has a coach, maybe multiple coaches, depending on what the event is. Any business person is going to have some sort of mentor or coach if they're super successful. So, any musicians going to have a coach. Pavarotti, considered the greatest opera singer of his lifetime when he was alive, went to a vocal coach every year. The greatest opera singer in the world went to a vocal coach every year. So I think it's great to go and seek out help from somebody who has the experience to help you in that way. But I think in terms of when we're feeling that hurt and pain, it may be unconscious. And so I think people get frustrated when they go to talk therapy and they're there for years and they don't see change because my, having talked to them, because then they end up coming to me as the last resort. Hypnotherapists are looked like, like we're witch doctors. It's like people come to a hypnotherapist mainly because that's all they got left. They've gone to the doctors, they've gone to the therapist, they've done everything they know to do. They've done the medications and they're still in pain. And somebody may have suggested, hey, I quit smoking with hypnotherapy. Maybe you should try that. Or if somebody read it in a book and suggested to the person, they say, okay, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what else to do. And so they go to hypnotherapy and they fix themselves. And that's what's extraordinary about it. That's why I like this modality, is because you know what the problem is. And more importantly, you know what the answer is. Now, if you're talking to somebody who's struggling with a lot of anger in their life, a lot of rage, maybe a lot of anxiety, and they say, no, I don't. I've been anxious since I was a little kid. I have no idea why I'm anxious. Like, well, okay, maybe consciously you don't know why you're anxious. But in order to feel that anxiety in your body, and you can point to it, where do you feel that anxiety? Some people point to their chest, or some people point to their stomach or their gut, or the back of the head, or their throat, or their fists, or their arms, or wherever. There's a place where you feel that anxiety. And the only way to feel that in your body is to change your brain chemistry. You have to create that adrenaline, that cortisol, these neuropeptides, these molecules that dump into your bloodstream, hundreds of millions of these molecules called neuropeptides that send the message of emotion to the cells of your body, to the tissues, to the organs of your body. And these are literal molecules of fear, molecules of anxiety, molecules of anger, molecules of joy, molecules of love. But because you have that feeling state, you've changed your brain chemistry. The only way to change your brain chemistry in that way that we're talking about right now is through a thought or a memory. Now, that may be unconscious. That thought or memory may be unconscious, but that memory comes up, that thought comes up, maybe as a some sort of safety protocol, and your brain starts dumping that adrenaline, that cortisol, those neural peptides of anxiety and fear into your bloodstream. And you feel anxious. So yeah, maybe you don't know consciously why you're anxious, but your subconscious mind absolutely does. Because 5 minutes ago you weren't feeling anxious. Yes,
Right.
you're feeling anxious. So why are you feeling anxious now? Well, something got triggered. Your subconscious mind knows what it was because it got triggered. And so what you're dealing with is computer programming. And you have the right, you have the ability, you have the power to change that computer programming whenever you want. And whether this happened again, yet last week, last month, or 50 years ago, you have the ability to change it. And it doesn't take a long time. And that's why I really like this modality, because I'm not here to fix you. Hypnotherapy in and of itself isn't going to fix you. You're going to fix yourself, because who better to know what the problem is than you, and who better to know what the answer is, how to resolve it than you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the beauty of it, the power of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I've noticed this myself when I think about the idea of conventional therapy, right? You go and just talk to someone about your issues, whether it's a paid therapist or a friend or whomever.
yeah,
But from my understanding, it almost seems like you're continuing that feedback loop of
yeah,
thinking, reliving, experiencing, and then you're physiologically experiencing, right? So
yeah,
to me, it almost seemed like, okay, well, then why am I? This doesn't seem like it's helping.
yeah,
And it almost makes sense when you start talking about this idea of fear molecules and the software that's just on loop that you almost have to break out of. And I think that's where it's interesting, because what you're saying is we're trying to reprogram that release of that physiological feeling in a way,
yeah.
because I think when we're and from my understanding, there's a lot of trauma that can be stored in the body, stress that can be stored in the
Mhm.
body,
Yeah.
um, and it becomes to the point where it's almost sometimes even difficult to detect. Like you said, that there's a trigger point, but we may not even be aware what exactly that trigger point is. Does hypnotherapy start to pinpoint that
Oh yeah,
exact
yeah,
understanding?
yeah.
Hmm.
And you hit upon a couple of great points, and I'm going to try to remember them all. But you're right. When you go to your friend and you take that walk around the park, or you go to the coffee shop, or you sit in your living room, wherever, and you just rant and about your day and the idiots at work or traffic on the highway or whatever. You're literally programming that into your mind, because what is strongest within your mind is what you do over and over again. And so what if you're practicing anxiety, if you're practicing anger, you're just going to get better at it. Just like if you're practicing the piano or practicing guitar or practicing dance or martial arts or a foreign language, riding a bicycle, learning to walk when you're a little kid. What you practice, you get better at. So if you're practicing anxiety, if you every day after work you meet up with friends and just talk about how awful your life is, why would you think anything is going to get better? You're as you another thing you said, you're just programming yourself to be this way. You're literally telling yourself, yeah, I'm so angry, I'm so anxious, I hate my life, I hate my job. And guess what? You hate your job. How about that? Who could have figured? And so what's nice about this is that even if you don't know what the issue is, you know what the issue is. And a great example is somebody I worked with a few years ago, and I was doing so since the COVID era a few years ago. Everything has gone to Zoom, which is nice in that now I just don't have to work with the people in my town. I can work with people around the state of Arizona where I live. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, a smallish kind of town, about 60,000 people near the Grand Canyon and up in the mountains. But now I have the opportunity to work with people not only around Arizona, but around the country and technically around the world.
Mhm.
So if you have an internet connection and we can communicate and speak English together, because that's my main language that I do well with, um, we can work together. And so it's extraordinary what the modern technology can help you do. So Zoom is great, and we can do sessions over Zoom. And what's that real quick side note about that is what research shows is whether you're doing talk therapy or hypnotherapy or a doctor's appointment, Zoom sessions work as well as in person. And some research even shows that Zoom sessions work better than in-person sessions because people feel comfortable and relaxed in their homes. They feel safe in their homes. And then they don't have to drive across town in rush hour traffic on a Friday afternoon trying to get their appointment.
Right,
But
to an unfamiliar environment.
yeah, exactly. Because there's always going to be a little bit of hesitancy doing something new office, new place, a new person. But if you feel comfortable in your homes, and it's like, and then you don't have to, you know, not waste time, but spend this time in your car driving across town, doing all that stuff, getting lost maybe if you're not familiar with the place. But a few years ago, I was doing classes for the cancer support community of Arizona, and these are weekly classes on pain control and healing acceleration and boosting your immune system, things like that. And you get 12, 15 people in these classes. And there's an older woman who was in the classes, and I'm guessing she is about in her 70s. And we did two classes. The first two classes, she was in them. And on the third class, I was early, setting up the class, waiting for people to show up. And she came to the class a little bit early, and we were just chit chatting, waiting for other people to show up and start the class. And she asked me if hypnotherapy works with procrastination. And yeah, it works well with procrastination. Procrastination is a defense mechanism. Look, you want to move away from the fight in the street, wildfire coming towards your house. You want to move away from that. Maybe here, out in the desert down in southern Arizona, you see a rattlesnake in the trail. You want to move away from that. Make yourself small. Keep away from it. But when you have procrastination, now it's not very resourceful to you because now you're moving away from something that may benefit you, that getting that report done. So maybe you're up for the promotion or the PowerPoint presentation to your investors for your business you want to start, or the homework you're supposed to turn in so you can graduate or pass the class. Uh, Now this is, hindering your development and growth because there's a fear somewhere, fear of failure, fear of judgment, something. And so you got procrastination. So it's a mindset issue. Hypnotherapy works well with that. And I say, yeah, we can definitely work on that. And so we set up an appointment for the very next afternoon. 24 hours later, I had an opening. And what's interesting about this work is when the subconscious mind realizes that you're going to do some healing work, it sort of goes, well, we can work on a problem, but why not work on the problem and let's be done with it? That's generally why people seek out the help of a hypnotherapist. They're, like they say, they're done. They're ready for the change. So let's work on the problem. And so when she got to the appointment 24 hours later, the 70-year-old woman says, look, I know I told you I wanted to work on procrastination, but what I really want to work on is why I don't matter in life. There's a 70-year-old woman who thinks she doesn't matter in life, that she thinks she's worthless. And so, yeah, we can absolutely work on that because there's a feeling state to feeling worthless, to not mattering in life. And so we're doing this process, doing this work. She doesn't know why she doesn't matter in life. She doesn't know why she feels worthless. It's just the way she feels. To feel that way, you have to change brain chemistry to create those neural peptides of unworthiness, of anxiety, of fear, of anger. And to change your brain chemistry in that way, you can only do it by a thought or memory. So she knows what it is, maybe not consciously, but her subconscious mind does. So let's go back to the very first time you ever felt that. Let's go back to the origin of that feeling state you feel in your body. And so we're doing some processes, some therapeutic hypnosis processes, and we do a regression. Let's go back to the very first time you ever felt it, 10 down to one. On one, you'll be at that very first time you ever felt it. I count backwards. And on one, where are you? And she says, I'm standing up in my crib and my father is screaming at me because I won't stop crying. And I don't know, standing up in the crib, that's like 12 months old, 14 months old. And if she's 70 years old or so, a couple of years ago, uh, yeah, that's probably the late 1950s, early 1960s, depending on how old she was. And, back then, dads probably weren't taught how to nurture young children. And maybe dad's having a bad day or a bad week or a bad life, and mom's not around. And he doesn't know how to take care of the baby. He wasn't shown how to do this. And the baby won't stop crying. He doesn't know what the baby wants. The baby can't talk or express need that, tell him what he needs. And he just gets so frustrated to the point where the only thing he knows how to do is just scream louder than the baby and tell the baby to shut up. And now the baby, that child, needs to justify, as we all do, we need to justify why this is happening to us. Why this person who's supposed to be nurturing us and protecting us and giving us love, why this person now screaming at us, this is terrifying. It's got to be very traumatic, especially for a child, let alone an adult. And in that instant, that child, in trying to justify why this is happening, says, well, I guess the only reason this is happening is because I don't matter. True or not true? Of course, it's not true, but that's what the instructions were installed into that, kind of subconscious programming we were talking about earlier. And she held on to that for some 70 years until one day she decided it was enough and it was time to let it go and to heal it. And she did in that one session. And
Wow.
now, granted, there was 2 or 3 sessions of her priming her nervous system to do this work, doing group work with pain control and healing acceleration in those classes. But we did one session because she was ready to let it go. She was ready to heal. That's why you come to a hypnotherapist. You're ready to do it. And even if you don't know what the problem was, she knew exactly what to do to heal it. She knew what it was. She knew what to do to heal it, not in her conscious mind, but subconsciously. And she did. And I never worked with her again. I heard from her for about a year. Every few months, we'd just check in with each other through email. She's doing great, doing fantastic. And she knew what the problem was unconsciously, and she knew what to do about it unconsciously. And that's what we did. And if you think, how long in talk therapy would it have taken her to get all the way back to being a year old, standing up in the crib? And that's I think sometimes, again, the frustration that people encounter with talk therapy is you talk about a problem or two, maybe even go back a few years or decades, but you're 70 years old and you're talking about something that happened 68, 70, 72 years ago. How are you going to remember that, let alone know what to do about it? But her subconscious mind had stored that information for protection. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
keep yourself safe by thinking you're unworthy. It's a way to keep yourself small, keep yourself hidden, because that's a way to keep yourself safe. And I don't know, maybe dad wasn't the greatest dad in the world. And maybe that was the best way that child could keep herself safe, was being small and hidden. But that doesn't work when you're an adult, when you're 20s or your 30s, let alone later in life. But for whatever reason, she held on to that because that worked for her for, maybe not in the most resilient or resourceful way, but She held on to it till she decided it was time to let it go, and she did.
Right.
One session, granted, 2 or 3 warm-up sessions or sessions that kind of helped her understand what the work was all about. When she understood it, the work was safe and it could be done in a gentle way, she decided, okay, it's time to do the heavy lifting and remove this stuff, take off the coat.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, we were talking about before, my part of my story was the depression and anxiety I felt in my life since I was a teenager, and that was back in the 1980s. And I was saying after a while, you just feel that this is who you are. It's sort of like wearing a coat, a comfortable coat. Maybe it's got some
Hmm.
holes in it and doesn't keep you very warm, but it's a comfortable coat, and that's just the one you wear. And you don't realize that you're able to take it off. You don't have to
Yeah.
wear that coat anymore. And when you get to that realization, it's really empowering,
Yeah.
and you can change. You know,
Well, that makes
no,
me wonder, right? Because, like you said with the code, if someone, let's say, what's interesting is the story you mentioned with the lady. She knew exactly where she wanted to attack, which was very interesting. I think many people, like you said with the code idea, is so ingrained that they don't even know where to attack.
yeah.
How does that work when you're looking for change?
Generally, people come because they feel something is off. They know it can be better. They don't want to
Hmm.
feel like this anymore. And when oftentimes we start with a consultation call, a free consultation call, I talk to people over the phone and just, what do you want to work on? Here's how hypnotherapy works, because there's a lot of misconceptions about this work. That's why we talk about that, 20 minutes or half an hour, and then we set up an appointment. And I send them an intake form to fill out online. And sometimes people just write one word. What do you want to work on? Anxiety. And that's it. Oh, then that's what we work on.
Hmm.
Other people write 5 paragraphs. And and even you write the 5 paragraphs, and maybe that's not what the problem is, you know. And that's what, again, empowering about this. You know what the problem is. And even if it's just, you can't define it other than I feel anxious all the time, or I feel really angry, or my mom said I was born anxious, or somewhere in my teenage years, I just became a really angry kid. I don't know why. Uh, well, great. That's a great starting point. Let's work with that. And generally, I tell people with hypnotherapy, expect 3 or 4 or 5 sessions. But this isn't talk therapy. We're not going to be doing 80, 90, 100
Yeah.
sessions over 2 years. But that also, there's a caveat to that. We're going to do a lot of healing work in those few sessions that we do together. But as we talked about before, what you practice, you get better at. What's strongest in your mind, within your body, is what you do over and over again. So if you want joy, you want happiness, you want confidence in your life, there's practice to that. Now, if you just have 5 minutes, you can do 5 minutes of work. But if you want more joy in your life, you can have it, but you have to practice. Just like getting a black belt in judo or taekwondo, uh, you have to practice. And you can get a black belt in joy. You can get a black belt in happiness and confidence. But there's going to be practice. Again, we just went through the Olympics, and I guarantee you, every single athlete was practicing every day, whether they had an event or not that day, whether they were running or swimming or whatever they were doing, gymnastics. They were practicing every single day, and part of their practice was not just if they're doing gymnastics, they're out on the mat doing their routine. They're also then going back to their room or a comfortable private place, sitting in a comfortable chair or couch or recliner or something, and then they're mentally rehearsing that event. So they're imagining in their minds, just closing their eyes and pretending they're crossing the finish line first, or they're jumping into the swimming pool 1/100th of a second before everybody else to get to leverage that little edge of time, or they're doing gymnastics and they're slow motion going through the twists and the turns and the sticking the dismounts and all this. They're mentally rehearsing, and you can take a cue from that, because that's a great way to bring more joy and happiness and confidence into your life. You don't feel confident right now? Pretend you're confident.
Uh-huh.
Your mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And that's what's extraordinary about this work. Even if you don't have the joy right now, even if you don't feel happy, you don't feel the love or compassion for human beings right now, uh, you can pretend you do, and then you practice that. And that will literally wire that into your brains. They've shown that just, they did a piano player study um, some years ago. We were talking about Joe Dispenza a little bit before we started recording, and Joe Dispenza talks about this research study where uh, they brought in people to learn piano because they wanted to watch the brain as it learned something new. So they had the people who actually played the piano and practiced every day. They had the control group that didn't do anything because you want to compare contrast. Here's a group that plays piano. Here's a group that doesn't do anything, doesn't learn anything. What are the differences? But they also had a group that only pretended to play the piano. They showed them the scales and the exercises and the little songs you learn as piano, as you're learning piano, but they never touched the piano. They sat in a recliner on the couch and they closed their eyes and just pretended to play the piano. At the end of the week, looked at everybody's brain, the MRIs, the SPECT scans, and all that. Control group, nothing changed, of course, because they didn't do anything. No big mystery there. The group that put their hands on the piano, worked the keys with their fingers, heard the music with their ears, read the sheet music with their eyeballs, they developed a new neural network in the part of the brain for music. Of course they did, because they're learning music. Again, that's no big mystery. Brain cells connecting together as they're learning something new. No big mystery there. But what's extraordinary is the group who only pretended to play the piano developed the same neural network in the same part of the brain. Their brains look like they're playing the piano, even though they never touched the piano, never heard the music, never read the sheet music. And so you can pretend your way to mastery. And so pretend that you're happy. I know that's easy just to riff off that little piece of advice. But if you truly want the confidence, let's say you're running your business, you're at work or something, you're at school, and you have to give that presentation, whether it's in front of a class or in front of the board of directors, or you're engaging in some new investors, or you're tapped to give the keynote speech at the conference. We have two choices. You can pretend that you're doing poorly at it and you're stumbling over your words and your PowerPoint presentation is upside down and everybody's laughing at you. You can pretend that's happening, or you can pretend you're doing it successfully. Both are going to wire something into your brain. So are you wiring failure into your brain, or are you wiring success into your brain? You can just pretend. I guarantee you every single Olympic athlete, or probably every professional athlete, is mentally rehearsing whatever event they're doing. Back in the day, Michael Jordan was mentally rehearsing free throw shots or 3-pointers, or Tiger Woods was mentally rehearsing, probably still is, mentally rehearsing golf shots. After practicing, let alone doing the actual match. And so, if that's what they call golf, obviously I'm not a golfer, but if you just spend some time every day just practicing being the person you want to be, you'll actually wire that into your system. That research study with the piano players, that lasted a week. They were literally rewiring their brains in less than a week. So this doesn't take
Wow.
a long time, but you have to do the work. And a great example of this is the Dalai Lama still meditates every day. The man's 89 years old. And if there was anybody that was to have it down by now, you think it'd be that guy. And but you read his books. He talks about the anger and the despair and the sorrow of what's going on in Tibet, let alone the rest of the world. Chinese government still bulldozing down his monasteries to build roads and buildings, and probably just to give him the middle finger, and arresting his monks and torturing his monks. And of course, he's a human being. He's going to feel anger around that. He was exiled out of Tibet in 1957, something like that. And so there's a lot of anger there, I'm sure. As a human being, he's going to feel that, but he doesn't want that to be who he is. So every day he practices loving kindness and compassion. What is strongest within your mind is what you practice over and over again. So every day the Dalai Lama, at 89 years old, still practices loving kindness and compassion meditation. And again, if anybody's to have it down by now, you think be that guy. He's not married.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any kids. He's not running his own small business. He doesn't have a boss who's an idiot. You know, he he has a staff of people to meet his every need and want. And granted, he has great responsibility, but he doesn't have a lot of the challenges that you and I have, Shiva, and your listeners have.
Hmm.
And yet he's still doing the work. If anybody was to have it down by the age of 40 and just kick back the rest of their life, it would be that guy. Or, look at like any master musician like Yo-Yo Ma, considered the greatest cello player alive today. Or, he's 67 and still practices 2, 3, 4 hours a day. Again, if anybody was to have it down and maybe just, stop practicing and phone it in by the age of 40, it'd be him. Just play Carnegie Hall, play a night of Mozart once a month at Carnegie Hall, it'd be him. But he wants to master the music, master the instrument. And so he practices every day. Pavarotti was going to a vocal coach every year. Dalai Lama still meditates every day. So what is it that you want? You want more joy? You want more happiness in your life? You want more confidence? You can have it, but look at the masters of anything. Any black belt in Taekwondo, any black belt in Judo practices every day. Because if they don't, by the end of the year, a yellow belt's going to be able to kick their ass. And
Hmm.
so they practice every day. Bruce Lee practiced every day. And so if you want, whether it's physical health, spiritual health, mental health, emotional health, all of it, yeah, there's work to be done, but you can, grow and develop in a positive way, but it takes practice. And, I think that's what separates the masters from people who just wear the heavy coat of depression and anxiety. It's like, yeah, you can take off the coat, but then there's some work to be done.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
find what you said is absolutely incredible. The idea where your mind can practice something into existence and it doesn't
Yeah.
know the difference between reality and imagination, which almost lets you realize how powerful the mind really is. Because if it can do that, then the negative thoughts must have as much power as well over
Yeah.
your being, which means we have to constantly have this internal balance and understanding of what's going on. Otherwise, the you know we become the slave to the mind rather than having control over our present moment and existence. It and you mentioned all this, which I find very interesting, right? So okay, we want to practice into existence, believe, have confidence, rewire yourself. But you said also, belief and mindset is important, but that's not enough. You also have to actually do the work.
Yeah.
And then going backwards to your story with the lady that you had helped. Well, quick side note: did her productivity increase after she
Yeah.
increased her self worth?
Yeah. She didn't feel the need to
Understanding.
hide anymore. She didn't have to back away from things that may be slightly uncomfortable or would have put her out uh, to the world,
Hmm.
because it was safer for her to hide and make herself small. And again, maybe her father wasn't the greatest father in the world, and it was safest for her as a child growing up to be small and to hide. That kept her safe from potentially emotional abuse, physical abuse. That happens, unfortunately, in the world. But as we were just talking about, what you practice, you get better at, especially as a child.
Hmm.
We learn, to walk and talk and do all these things in school by practicing it over and over again. So what if you're practicing hiding? What if you're practicing keeping yourself small? And by healing that part of her, by healing the child, she didn't need to hide anymore. And whether she was, doing her art that she wanted to show to, the art fairs, or go out and meet new people, or go to game night with her friends, she was able to do that. So she felt confident she didn't that it was safe to be out there, because she changed the programming in her own mind. Now, of course,
Right.
yeah, there's going to be practice to that. It might have been uncomfortable at the beginning to, like, oh, I gotta sit there with my art at a fair and have strangers come up and judge me, because there is that, and that's scary. But she had the confidence within her now that she healed the child, to stand in her own strength and be able to do that. And we're all able to do that. And but I think what is important about what you just said is, this work of imagining your future. It's either extraordinarily empowering, or it can be really scary, because what if you are imagining failure? What if you're thinking about, you're trying to fall asleep at night, and somehow you got talked into giving the keynote speech at the conference coming up in a couple of months, and you're just lying cozy, comfortable in bed, but you're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to stammer. I'm going to forget what I'm going to say. My PowerPoint's going to be upside down and then not work. And then people are going to laugh at me, and they're going to snicker, and they're going to boo, and they're going to throw rotten tomatoes at me and chase me off the stage with pitchfork and fire. Is any of that going to happen? No. Okay, maybe your PowerPoint's upside down. So what? You know, but it's like your mind is trying to come up with scenarios to protect you, sort of like a flight simulator. Pilot needs to fly into London next week and never been to Heathrow Airport. They're going to practice on a flight simulator. What happens if there's turbulence over the Atlantic? What if it's at nighttime? What if they switch runways on me? What if it's raining? They're going to practice every scenario, so when they actually do it, they feel safe and comfortable. That's what your mind's trying to do, whether it's thinking about that pain or that hurt or that trauma that happened in the past, whether last month or 50 years ago, or it's fearing the thing in the future, that speech you have to give, or the homework you have to turn in, or the investor meeting or something. It's trying to protect you by, well, what happens if something ridiculous happens, like, whatever, everybody starts laughing at you and pointing and chasing you off the stage with fire and pitchforks. It's ridiculous, and it's not going to happen, but your mind and body thinks it's real, and will start the process of turning on the stress response while you're trying to go to sleep. And then all of a sudden, now you got insomnia, and you feel
Do you
off.
think,
It just becomes this
yeah,
loop.
do you
Yeah,
think this is the underlying reason for procrastination, or is
yeah,
it
because
too
it's
variable?
unsafe. It does not feel safe, even if you have to turn in that report. And if you get your report in before Bob does, man, you'll be up for the promotion. But it's like, oh yeah, but then that promotion, it's more money, and what am I going to do with more money? And so it's like, maybe it's safer if you just stay hidden in your office and Bob gets the promotion. Or turning in the homework is like, I really don't understand math, and it's going to be painful to try to get through this homework because I'm going to feel stupid because I don't know how to do these equations, or I don't, whatever the thing is. I don't know how to
And
do the chemistry or whatever,
uh-huh.
and it's going to make me feel stupid, and that's not going to feel good. So I don't want to. I don't want to do that, and so I'll move away from it. Even though turning in the homework or turning in the report is going to get you good grades, so you graduate, so you get a good job, so you know, there's
Does
pain there.
this,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and does
unsafe.
this defense mechanism result from or stem from anything from your childhood? Do you think that's mainly where it comes
Quite
from?
quite possibly. There's a lot of theories out there that most of our hurt and pain and our personality or characteristics of who we are developed between the ages of, you know day 1 and 7 years old. Even the Jesuits, the Christian kind of offshoot of the Jesuits, have a saying. They say, "Give me the boy, and I'll give me the boy till the age of 7, and I'll give you the man."
Hmm.
Because they know that the most of the programming happens between day 1 and 7 years old. And
You
so,
would think
yeah, a
it's
lot of the
later.
hurt debate now, obviously, if there's obviously things like, I was in a really bad car accident uh, when I was 25 years old, or I do a lot of flying for business. I fly 3 to 4 times a week. I've been doing it for 20 years, but last week I was on the most horrendous flight because of the turbulence, and the masts dropped down, and we dropped 3,000 feet, and it was awful and horrible, and I never want to fly again. Okay, there's obviously those kind of things that happen, or you get into an abusive relationship, uh, whether in a romantic relationship, or maybe abusive relationship at work because your boss is an idiot, or your co-workers mean. So there are those things that obviously happen later in life, but a lot of the stuff can be traced to uh, being a kid. Why does the boss bother you? Okay, he's an idiot. So what? Why does that bother you? Why do you get upset? There's sort of like the idea of, you're sitting there working in your office, you're doing marketing or whatever your job is, and all of a sudden an argument starts in the office next door. Bob and Fred, the accountants, are arguing and raising their voices because the end of the month numbers aren't adding up, and so a heated argument starts. and you have nothing to do with that. You don't really, engage with Bob and Fred because they're accountants and you're in marketing or whatever. And but those raised voices cause you to start to sweat a little bit and feel afraid, and you kind of hunker down a little bit. And that's because maybe you grew up in a household where your parents argued and fought and then eventually got divorced. And that was really scary as a kid. But here you are in your 40s, you're doing your work, you're doing awesome, you're doing great, and all of a sudden these two guys next door in the office next door start arguing about why the numbers aren't adding up in their accounting meeting, and they start yelling at each other, and that creates a triggering effect for you. You don't maybe know why. You're just I'm feeling really afraid. I'm feeling really anxious. I'm 40. Why do I feel afraid and anxious? Why am I sweaty? Why are my palms sweaty? And it's because that is triggering a memory from when you were a child of your parents arguing, maybe, and this is what can happen is that file from that hurt and pain is in your subconscious. And if it gets triggered, it's going to give you the warning signals of anxiety or anger or fear or worry. Maybe even physical symptoms like you're feeling nauseous or you start to sweat or your heart starts to race. And whether it's taking a test at school, whether it's engaging with people at work, your boss or people are above you on the pecking order of things at work, and you're feeling anxious about that, it's probably a good chance is because something happened when you were a kid. There's other people who couldn't care less that their boss is an idiot or people are mean who are above them, or that Bob and Fred are arguing this. Bob and Fred, those two guys, can't believe those guys again. And then you like
Hmm.
bang on the door, hey, shut up. They
Yeah.
don't care. They just want Bob and Fred to stop it so they can get on with work. Somebody else may trigger a lot of hurt and pain because of what happened when they were a kid. So it just kind of depends.
Hmm.
Hurt can happen, yesterday, or maybe it was 50 years ago. But it's just kind of your brain is always learning. It's always trying to find ways to keep you safe. Your subconscious mind is for you.
Hmm.
It may not seem like that sometimes, but it's trying to protect you. It's just using the instructions that maybe were set up by a child. And again, maybe that was the best thing the child could have done to keep themselves
Yeah.
safe. But that's not going to work when you're 20 or you're 30 or God, my God, you're in your 70s or 80s. So that's where, again, whether it is talk therapy or hypnosis, therapeutic hypnosis or something else, you just got to keep working on yourself mentally,
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually, physically. You, you can't just go to the gym once, work with a personal trainer once at a gym and then you're, in shape for the rest of your life. You got to work out every day, doing something, at least just walking around the block or, walking around the park or something. You don't necessarily have to go to the gym or do a dance class every day, but you got to do something every day to work out your body. And otherwise, it falls apart. But the same with your mental health and your emotional health and your spiritual health. And if you just have 5 minutes, just do 5 minutes. You know. So,
I I often have this idea that or this thought where the older I get, I see people, not everyone, but I see oftentimes this inner child within adults, right?
mm,
The more people you meet, the more you see that everyone's got this framework that was developed from childhood that now progresses into their adulthood. And I think oftentimes the most attractive people you meet have this sense of calmness, this sense of
yeah,
healing about them. And those tend to be the most enjoyable people because they, you know, like you said, we're humans. We all go through some sort of human experience of good and bad, and we all have stories, I'm sure of it. But the people that truly healed themselves from their issues tend to be, and maybe you can explain this better than I can, but there's some mechanism there that makes them more attractive, maybe
yeah.
subconsciously, maybe it's their mannerisms, I don't know, or maybe it's the way they think or talk.
I think it's just the confidence
Mm,
and the ability to stand in the power of their own strength. Stand in the strength of their own power. I think you just stand differently. And they say something like 56% of communication is physical, is body language. And
Right.
then something like, I don't know, 30%, 32%, 35% is tone, how you say the words. So something like whatever the math ends up being, 7% or so is just the words.
Right.
And so, and stereotypically, if you saw somebody walking down the street, they're all hunched over, like, oh boy, that person's really depressed. They're really sad. If you're standing up straight and you're feeling confident and inspired, it's like, you, yeah, there's more charisma there. There's more confidence, and that's a more of attractive quality. You want to
Yeah.
be that person's friend because they're confident in their own skin, and that comes with doing a lot of work on yourself,
Mhm.
doing a lot of healing. And again, it just doesn't stop. You just got to keep going if you want to be in shape, and not even necessarily having like a six-pack Marvel superhero kind of body, but just being in shape. You got to do something every day. And so, what does that mean for your mental health? What does it mean for your emotional health? What does it mean for your spiritual health? Especially if you spend so much time in traffic and at a job maybe you're not thrilled with, or you have kids and that can be challenging, or long-term relationships, and you're growing, and all the challenges of life. Yeah, you still got to be doing the work.
Yeah. You touched on this lightly that when you're going through an event, or let's say, even for example, the office argument, let's say you're the observer of two people arguing, and like you had mentioned in this example, your heart rate starts, beating faster, you start getting a little bit anxiety. Maybe it's from your past and your past experiences that are bringing about this current symptom. And so you've touched on this idea of, short-term anxiety or even depression, but when we look at long-term anxiety or chronic anxiety, chronic depression, I'm
Mm.
trying to understand what is the almost evolutionary purpose. Why do we even have this mechanism of
Yeah,
feeling depressed? Is it supposed to be like a catalyst for change? Is it supposed to push us,
I
right?
think, yeah, for some reason we're wired to feel the full spectrum of emotions, and certainly there is time for anger, and there is time for sorrow. You lose somebody close to you. You lose your pet, your dog, your cat. You lose somebody, a pet, an animal that's close to you. Yeah, that's a great time for grief and sorrow. That's appropriate. It'd be strange if you didn't feel sorrow and
Right.
grief around that. Sort of like the Dalai Lama example. It'd be odd that if he didn't feel angry about that situation in Tibet. So there is a time for anger. It's just when it starts looping to the point that you're practicing so much. Now, the thing with depression is depression's a symptom of something. It's not an illness or a disease in and of itself. And that's what's insidious about it is, are you depressed because you went through a great hurt and trauma while you're a kid? Are you depressed because you have a thyroid issue? Are you depressed because it's a side effect of medication you're taking? Are you depressed because you're reacting to too much alcohol that you're drinking? Are you depressed because it's maybe a genetic issue that got triggered because of a past trauma? Like my mother's depressed, I'm depressed. I see, depression in my son too. And so we work on it. Here's what we can do. Is that because we married in the home? Is that because of a genetic issue? But it's also a head injury can cause depression. It's been shown that the symptoms of depression can show up 2 years after a traumatic brain injury, like a concussion or a car accident. Concussion in a football game, or falling off a roof when you're doing construction, or you're in a car accident. The symptoms of depression can show up 2 years later. And so how how do you know what the problem is with depression? That's what's so frustrating with the medications. If you have a traumatic brain injury, if you're in a car accident 18 months ago, and you go to a doctor, I'm just feeling low, I'm not feeling good. It's like, oh, here's a prescription for Prozac. Well, that's not going to help you. So flooding your brain with serotonin is not going to help you. If it's a thyroid issue, that's not going to help you. If it's a side effect of the medication your doctor gave you 3 months ago, putting more medication in your body is not going to help you. And so that's the frustration with depression, is it can be so many different things. And again, what you practice, you get better at too. So even if it is a thyroid issue, the feeling state of depression can probably get wired into your body and into your mind. Same with anxiety. Now, anxiety and fear, that's an evolutionary need to keep us alive. Fear keeps you from walking down that dark alley at night, even though it's a shortcut home. If you didn't have fear, you just walk down any dark alleys. Well, I'm going to save 15 minutes by walking down this dark alley. Hopefully that works out for you. But it'd be better if you kept to the lighted streets and where the crowds are. That keeps you safe. Petting the rattlesnake in the trail. If you're hiking out in the desert, don't do that. You want fear, you want anxiety from doing that. And so these feeling states are actually a warning signal from your mind that there's danger. Again, the problem is the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And this is most noticeable when somebody's having a nightmare in the middle of the night. And it could be something really crazy, something ridiculous. If you've had, Shiva, like a nightmare in the night, or your listeners
Hmm.
maybe experienced it, or maybe your kids have, it can be something super ridiculous, super stupid. And it's a gigantic cheeseburger, and his two hot dog friends are chasing you down the street throwing coconuts at you. It's ridiculous. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And yet there you are, deep in sleep, and your mind thinks, oh my God, we're under attack. I can't tell whether this is real or imagined or a dream. So it has this shoot first, ask questions later protocol. Let's just turn on the defense mechanism. So in deep sleep, you're turning on that adrenaline and cortisol. And you've heard the crazy stories of grandmothers lifting cars off of babies. That's adrenaline doing that. That's not coursing
Yeah.
through your body. Neuropeptides, molecules of fear and anxiety being dumped in your bloodstream. 300% more blood is now moving to the big muscles of your arms to fight. 300% more blood moving to big muscles of your legs to escape. That's got to come from somewhere. So it's turning down the power in your immune system, turning down the power on your digestive system, all while you're in deep sleep. So imagine what's happening in your waking life, you know, and you hear Bob and Fred arguing in the office next door. And, you know, is it real threat or an imagined threat? No, it's just Bob and Fred doing their usual end of the month argument about the numbers. But that triggers something within you. And the warning signal, instead of like in a building, you pull the fire alarm, you get the sirens and the lights warning everybody that there's danger, you need to get to safety. Well, our warning system is anxiety or fear or worry and overwhelm. And thank God, because again, it keeps us from, walking down that dark alley. I mean, to be horrendous about it, but if you hear gunshots in a grocery store, don't walk into the grocery store. That fear and anxiety is there to keep you away from extraordinarily dangerous situations. And that's why people can get that post-traumatic stress disorder. You're in war, and you're turning on that stress response for deep terror and fear over and over and over again because you're on the front lines. And then it's like you're wiring that into your system. So now every time someone takes their cup and bangs it on the table, you're reacting. Um, and so why we needed evolutionary is to keep us alive. It keeps us from, okay, the bushes are moving over there. Is that the wind, or is there a wild animal? Is it prey to me, or I'm prey to it? Is it going to hunt me, or am I going to hunt it? Or is it just the wind? And you get that anxiety. It's like, oh, it's just the wind. And you go about your day. And so it's needed. It keeps us from peering over the edge of the Grand Canyon too far. It's just when it becomes unresourceful and not very resilient to us is when it just starts looping, like you talked about before. And we're looping it for things that aren't dangerous to
Hmm.
us. That may our subconscious mind's like, well, that argument sort of sounds like when your parents were arguing, or when you're 12 years old, you're in a head-on car accident with a red pickup truck, and now you're 50 years old and you're driving down the street. It's clear traffic, a beautiful day, windows are down, music's playing, and now your peripheral vision, you see a red pickup truck parked in a grocery store parking lot. It's not moving, it's not coming at you, but it was enough to like, okay, there's a red pickup truck. Last time we saw a red pickup truck, you don't even remember the car accident. Your subconscious mind, red pickup truck, that's dangerous. Be on alert. And you arrive at your destination, you're all like grabbing the steering wheel, and you're kind of sweaty and you're nervous. And like, it was a great day. I don't know what's going on. So your subconscious mind is trying to warn you that there's danger. And so I don't know that you necessarily want to get rid of fear, anxiety, you know, uh, fear keeps us from touching that hot pot on the stove, so it keeps us safe. So I don't know you want to get rid of it. It's just when it becomes, you know, not very resourceful to us,
Yeah.
not very resilient, is when it hampers our progress and our growth.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
could definitely see it being a need as a survival mechanism, right?
yeah,
Your I guess your hindbrain, your primitive brain is trying to make the best sense as it can with what it's got, which is its senses, right? It's touch, smell, sight, and it's
yeah,
trying to understand what's going on and creating these episodes. Um, but I also wanted to say I totally relate to that story you mentioned with, a nightmare or having some
yeah,
sort of crazy dream at night. And I've even experienced waking up with immense amount of adrenaline to the point where you can't go back to sleep
yeah,
because your brain thinks, or at least thought, that that was real. You wake up, you're breathing heavy, and literally within a few seconds of realizing, okay, no, I'm safe in my bed. Now I
yeah,
can't sleep for the next hour and a half because I have adrenaline coursing through
yeah.
me. Um, so yeah, I do see there is a relationship here where I think your subconscious, your primitive brain, whatever you want to call it, is doing the best it can, trying to protect you. Meanwhile, we have this conscious, aware sense of awareness mind where we're trying to maneuver through the world. So it's this balance of understanding what happened to you and how you can heal from it, I think is what truly, the theme throughout this talk has really been
Yeah.
about is healing so you can kind of move forward, imagine into your next steps, into your next goals of life. So that kind of segues me into wanting to ask you, as you know, the show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I love to ask my guests as a closing question, what is one lesson that either you learned from someone or you want the audience to learn from your own journey that you'd like to share as a closing remark?
I think the biggest thing we've touched upon it a couple of times is what is strongest within your mind is what you do over and over again. So practice who you want to be. If you don't feel confident, if you don't feel happy, you don't feel joyful, you can practice. Now, there may be some, trauma, some hurt and pain that needs to be cleared up, needs to be resolved and healed. But that, just because you get rid of that chronic anxiety or that chronic hurt and pain doesn't mean all of a sudden you're joyful and happy. That still needs to be wired into your system, into your nervous system, into your brain, like literally wired into your brain. Like you're learning how to walk, or you're learning a foreign language, or you're learning dance or martial arts or something, musical instrument. But you can learn it. And a lot of it comes from practice. The Dalai Lama still meditates every day. So practice who you want to be. And that's just the resolve that there's a certain relentlessness to this work of mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, physical health. There's a certain relentlessness to us. We know this from physical health. We know we just don't get to go to the gym once. We
Yeah.
have to go to the gym or dance class or exercise class or riding your bike or whatever the thing is. Whatever it is you feel is best for your body, you need to do that multiple times a week, if not every day. And so then what are you doing for your mental health? What are you doing for your emotional health, your spiritual health? You need to be doing something. And even if it's just for 5 minutes, you can find something to do. There's lots of great techniques. Everybody's a bit different. There's not one, cure all technique and exercise that's going to work with everybody. So, explore and practice different things and see what works best for you. But find something you do, even if it's just for 5 minutes, find something you can do every day. And if it's just pretending that you have confidence to give that speech, you're confident in something. If it's just tying your shoes or zipping up your jacket, well, that's silly. That's kind of a small thing. Yeah, but you can tie your shoes or you can ride a bicycle or you drive a car or whatever it is. You're confident that you can get that pair of shoes, you can tie them onto your feet, and you can walk out the door without tripping over the laces. You're confident you can do that. What does that confidence feel like? And feel in your body, and now imagine with that feeling state that you're given that speech next month, or whatever the thing is you need confidence for, and you'll start you know wiring that confidence to that activity, that event, and you'll become a different person. You'll literally wire that into your nervous system and into your brain, but it takes practice.
I'm curious, is it better to envision the process or the result?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I think the result, because you may not have a full grasp of what the process is to
Hmm.
do that. You might be, let's say, martial arts. So we mentioned that a couple of times. Maybe you just see yourself at the black belt ceremony. You just started class last week. You're not even close to being a black belt, but you see yourself at the black belt ceremony with your teacher at the dojo, handing you the black belt. Maybe your friends are there. Maybe your family's even there, celebrating. Now, how are you going to get there? Now your subconscious mind comes up with the ways to get there. Maybe you see yourself with the job you want, maybe the business you want to open. You don't know how to open up a business. You don't know what the tax situations are, let alone the business licenses you need, let alone where's the store going to be or the building going to be. But you see what and feel yourself with that business open and successful. Now, how is that going to become a successful business? That may take hiring some good people and getting some good advice and getting the right accountant, and who's the right accountant. So it's like process, like, okay, well, I'm going to interview 3 accountants. I'm going to ask. I don't think that's necessary, but I think seeing yourself with the success. I don't think any Olympic athlete, um, you know well, I guess they do mental rehearsal, they're doing their event, but it may not be like they're seeing themselves eating breakfast every day, all the protein they're eating,
Right.
or the physical therapy they may be doing, or the yoga they may be doing after their event to stretch out their muscles. They may just be seeing their event, how well they're doing. Same like with giving the speech.
Hmm.
Let's say you're giving your presentation and it's just going well. It's successful. Now, did you hire a, a theater coach? Like, you went to your local theater and said, "Hey, I need help with my presentation. Can somebody help?" Or like a speech diction person, or a writer. Did you hire a writer? How did that speech get so awesome? That might come later, because
Yeah.
now your subconscious mind is going to say, "Yeah, we are successful at that speech. How's that going to happen?" And then all of a sudden, maybe you start seeing a book in a bookstore window, or you hear a conversation in a coffee shop, or you see somebody else give a speech, and you go up to them afterwards and you think, "Hey, why don't I ask this person how they got to the point of being an expert presenter?" And you just
Yeah.
ask for their advice, and that wouldn't have occurred to you if you hadn't thought about becoming an expert presenter yourself. So I wouldn't worry too much about visualizing the process. If you're playing guitar, you're playing piano, maybe, yeah, you want to see yourself playing piano, playing guitar. If you're doing athletics, your golf swing. If you're doing gymnastics, the twists, the turns, and the tumbles. If you're a swimmer, diving into the pool hundredths of a second before everybody else. But seeing yourself with the success, I think, is key, and the rest will just fall in line, because how do you get to that success? Well, your
Yeah.
subconscious mind is going to have to figure it out, not your conscious mind.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
I I love that. I love that example because if you try to too much to envision the process, or I guess in this way control the process,
yeah,
you might also just ignore open doors or open
yeah.
opportunities that actually either get you there or
Oh,
get you there
yeah.
faster.
That's a great point, because if you see the process, and then all of a sudden somebody's over here saying, "Hey, I can help you with that." Yeah, but you weren't in my daydream of
Right.
how this happens, so I'm not talking to you. Yeah, you
Yeah.
could. That's a extraordinarily great point. That's a genius point. Yeah, if you visualize the process, what if there's a simpler way of doing it,
Right.
and that's going to come later. So
Right. And I
yeah,
think that's at the end of the day, that's the whole point, right? Is to enjoy the journey and kind of just
yeah,
set markers of where you want to be.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you so much for
yeah. You're
being on the
welcome.
show. I appreciate your time.
Oh, it was a fun conversation. I had a really good time. Like I said, I
Great.
was looking forward to this, and I know we went a bit over time. Maybe this could be a part one and a part two or something. But it was fun talking with you.